So Ottawa just handed Doug Ford the keys to a bulldozer and said, "Have fun, we trust you," and honestly? That's either the best prank of 2025 or the worst environmental policy decision since someone thought let's just dump it in the lake was a solid waste management strategy. Premier Ford is out here celebrating like he just won regulatory bingo, Prime Minister Carney's nodding along, and environmental lawyers are stress-eating their way through entire cases of Tim Hortons donuts. Welcome back to Canadian Insights, where we cover the chaos so you don't have to. Buckle up, because this one's a doozy. Here's the deal. Ottawa and Ontario just signed what they're calling a one project, one agreement, one decision framework. Catchy, right? Sounds like a motivational poster you'd see in a government office next to the sad ficus plant. But what it actually means is that major projects in Ontario, including the infamous Ring of Fire mining development, no longer need to jump through federal environmental assessment hoops. They just need Ontario's stamp of approval. And if you're thinking, wait, isn't that like letting the fox guard the henhouse? Congratulations, you're paying attention. Doug Ford is calling this transformational. And you know what? He's not wrong. It's transformational in the same way that removing all the stop signs in Toronto would transform traffic flow. Technically efficient, but also absolutely terrifying. At Thursday's press conference, Ford was grinning ear to ear, talking about removing unnecessary red tape and regulatory duplication. Meanwhile, environmental groups are collectively screaming into the void like they just watched someone microwave fish in the office kitchen. Now let's talk about this red tape argument, because it's Ford's favorite greatest hit. Right up there with Folks and Buck-a Beer. The province insists that having both federal and provincial environmental assessments creates duplication. But here's the thing, and this is important, they're not actually duplicates. It's like saying your doctor and your dentist are redundant because they both look at your face. They serve different constitutional purposes. Federal assessments focus on things under federal jurisdiction, like fisheries, Indigenous rights, and navigable waters. Provincial assessments look at local environmental impacts. They're complementary, not competitive. Teresa McClenahan from the Canadian Environmental Law Association put it perfectly when she said this agreement is a solution in search of a problem. Translation? There isn't actually a major duplication issue here. What there is a premier who really wants to build stuff without anyone asking uncomfortable questions like, but what about the water quality? Or did you actually consult with the First Nations whose land this is? And speaking of the Ring of Fire, let's dive into that mineral-rich swamp of controversy. This Northern Ontario region is basically Canada's version of a gold rush, except instead of gold it's chromite, and instead of prospectors with pickaxes it's multinational mining corporations with quarterly earnings reports. Ford has been salivating over this project for years. He sees dollar signs and job numbers. Environmental groups see a fragile wetland ecosystem that's home to multiple First Nations communities who have repeatedly said, hey, can we maybe slow down and talk about this? Under this new agreement, Ford gets to fast-track Ring of Fire development with limited federal oversight. Limited federal oversight. Let that marinate for a second. The federal government, which is constitutionally responsible for protecting things like fish habitat and Indigenous rights, is essentially saying, you know what, Ontario's got this. It's like your parents leaving you home alone for the first time and saying, we trust you won't throw a party, and you're already texting everyone you know. Here's where it gets even spicier. Ontario under Doug Ford has already gutted a bunch of environmental protections. Remember when his government exempted major projects from environmental assessments? Remember when they tried to pave over parts of the Greenbelt before public outcry forced a humiliating reversal? This is the track record we're working with. And now the federal government is handing them more power with fewer checks and balances. What could possibly go wrong? Environmental experts are waving red flags so aggressively they're basically conducting a very angry seminar. The concern isn't just about environmental damage, though that's huge. It's also about transparency and public participation. Federal assessments require meaningful consultation with affected communities, especially Indigenous peoples. Provincial processes? Well, let's just say Ontario's environmental assessment process has more loopholes than a crocheted blanket. This agreement limits federal oversight even when projects would cause harm in areas under federal jurisdiction. Read that again. Even when there's harm to federally protected areas, Ottawa is stepping. And we absolutely cannot talk about this without addressing First Nations consultation, or rather, the lack thereof. Multiple Indigenous communities in Northern Ontario have been fighting for proper consultation on Ring of Fire development for years. They've raised concerns about water contamination, destruction of traditional territories, and being steamrolled by development decisions made in boardrooms hundreds of kilometers away. This agreement makes their fight even harder. With reduced federal involvement, there's less recourse when provincial processes fail to adequately consult or accommodate Indigenous rights. And given Ontario's track record, that's not a hypothetical concern, it's a pattern. From a political standpoint, this is fascinating in the worst way possible. Prime Minister Carney standing beside Doug Ford, smiling for the cameras, announcing this partnership. It's either a strategic move to appear pro-development and business-friendly, or it's a catastrophic miscalculation that environmental groups will hammer them on for months. Maybe both. Ford gets to claim victory and speed up his pet projects. Carney gets to say he's cutting red tape and working collaboratively with provinces. And environmental advocates get ulcers. The timing is interesting too. With economic concerns front and center, with inflation still pinching wallets, with infrastructure needs growing, there's political pressure to just get stuff built. Ford is capitalizing on that sentiment. The problem is that getting stuff built and getting stuff built responsibly aren't the same thing. And this agreement seems to prioritize the former while gambling with the latter. So where does this leave us? Ottawa's given Ontario a regulatory express lane, Ford's revving the engine, and environmental protections are nervously checking their life insurance policies. This agreement might speed up project approvals, but at what cost? To the environment, to Indigenous rights, to public oversight, to the very idea that maybe, just maybe, we should think carefully before we bulldoze wetlands and drill into fragile ecosystems. If you found this breakdown helpful, or if you're now as concerned as I am, smash that like button. Subscribe to Canadian Insights because we're posting multiple videos daily keeping you updated on all the political chaos this country throws at us. Drop a comment and let me know what you think. Is this streamlining progress or environmental disaster waiting to happen? Hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. And remember, stay informed, stay critical, and for the love of all that is poutine flavored, hold your politicians accountable. I'll catch you in the next one.